The next project here is going to be a storage cabinet, and this is the initial sketch that I came up with after I measured the area, which we needed a little bit less than 6 feet, and there's a window behind this that sits about 32 inches, and the depth I'm going to have at 16 inches. 16 primarily because that's some of the stock cuts I can get from the lumber that I buy from the home center. So this is what I started with, and it will have 4 doors, and inside it will have adjustable shelving. The shelves will adjust separately on this side and on this side over here. So what I'll do now is, or what I did, was take this sketch after I kind of measured it out and looked at everything the way I wanted it, and I'll make a full-size sketch. Here's the full-size sketch that I've done. So I put 2 pieces of this big paper I have together and just started laying things out, worked up from the bottom, and made this sketch. Now my paper was only so large, this is going to be a pretty big piece. So this is the center line right here. So I have half of it, and I can get all my measurements that I need for half of it. So we'll have two doors here. You can see the top side, and you can see all the dimensions are laid out. The dotted lines here show what's behind it, what size like the face frame will be, and what size all of the rails and stiles for the doors will be, and for the face frame, and then the bottom piece across there as well. I also made a drawing of the side too. So I have one from the front and one from the side, and this gives me all of the dimensions for the side pieces and the depth of the overall piece, how the bottom side pieces will look, how the doors will sit on here, and then all of the cross braces too, which become the face frame rails. So these are really helpful when I start to cut down all of the stock, because I buy all the stock at 6 foot or 8 foot sizes. So it's pretty helpful to have everything accurately laid out. Alright, so next I guess we'll look at our stock. We'll get some of the pieces and cut that up on the compound miter saw. Here's a mock-up of what the sides will look like, the side panels, and what also the doors will look like as well for this piece. So this is a piece of 1/4 inch plywood sanded on both sides because we're going to paint this. And then we have a stile and a rail here that are nestled together with, there's a groove in here, and this groove is a 1/4 inch wide by a 1/4 inch deep, and that runs the entire length. And then on the rails, this has the same groove that is a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch, only on the ends I have cut out a couple of pieces here so that I have a tenon on the end, and that will fit into this groove, which kind of becomes the mortise, and we get a nice snug fit that lines up really nice. And then this is the piece of 1/4 inch plywood that will go in there, and it will float in there. So what we're going to do first is I have cut the rails and stiles. It's just a regular piece of 3/4 inch wood. In this case it's 1 by 3, which turns out to be 2.5 inches by 3/4 of an inch. And we'll first take the groove out of here. To get the groove in here, a 1/4 inch wide by a 1/4 inch deep, I'm going to use my plow plane, and this has a 1/4 inch iron in it. And what I do, just to make sure that the guide steel here stays nice and slippery, is I will just kind of put a bunch of beeswax on it, on the inside and on the bottom, and that helps it to slide in the wood. This is set to cut a very, very thin shaving out of it. So This is set so it will be just a little bit off center, and it will ride against this guide side here. So take your time. This is a plow plane that I built. I made it here in the shop from scratch, and I do have a video on that if you want to build one. But just be careful. And just keep going through until you get to 1/4 inch deep. It gets bound up in there sometimes. Just keep working through it. A couple more passes here. There, that should be good. Okay, so we have the groove cut in here. Now we will cut the grooves into the longer styles, and then we'll work on cutting the tenons into the end of these rails. Taking the groove out of the really, really long styles in the end pieces is a little bit trickier. Just try to take your time, and I wax this up really well so that it slides through there. It does always tend to get bunched up a little bit in the groove, especially the deeper you go. But I try to set this so it just takes off a small shaving, and just be patient. If the vise gets a little bit wobbly, sometimes I'll switch to the bench top here to put the groove in here. I have these little pegs that have a flat side on them, and they go in the 3/4 inch holes along here. And then I have another one that is 7/8 that goes in the end of the vise. So we'll set it in here flat on the desktop, or the worktop. Snug that up. And then on my combination square, I have a 1/4 inch set for the depth. And then we'll just check it along here until we get all the way down to a 1/4 inch or just a little bit over it. So almost done with these. I'll finish this one up, And then we have all the stiles and rails almost done for the 3 end panels. Alright, I know that I want the width of the rail to be 9 1/4 inches. So what I did was I cut these at 10, so it would give me 3/8 of an inch for the tenons on the end. So I'm going to come in here with a real sharp pencil and mark 3/8 inch in from both sides, and then just to double check, that will be exactly 9 1/4 for the final size of the rail. And then what I'll do is with a real sharp pencil, I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to take a scoring knife here and cut through that grain. We lost a little bit there. Cut through that grain, and we'll do the same thing this way. I like to use the same guide side, so I'm flipping this over. So that'll cut through and give me a nice groove in there to saw by. Okay, so I'm going to follow this around to the other side. You could probably skip the pencil mark here if you wanted to, but just make sure you get a nice cut there. I cut all these boards by hand, so just in case this was off by a little bit, that's why I'm using my combination square to make these cuts, just in case that's off. A little bit later I will use my marking gauge, which you can set here and run along the edge, but then if your cut is off a little bit here, you'll have your score line will be off as well. So I have this score line, and now I'm going to take this one, bring this around, oops, I want to use this. I'm using the groove side here as my guide side, so we stay true. Alright, so now I have 9 1/4 here and 9 1/4 there. So next what I'm going to do is I want to mark the ends here, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, for the ends, we're going to use the groove that we cut in here to hold the plywood. That is going to tell us where we want to cut this piece out to form the tenon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a marking gauge, and I'm going to work from the opposite side, so it gives me a little bit more of a length. I just prefer that way. You could also do it this way, so then it's just a little bit shorter, but I'll show you here. So I'm going to line up my marking wheel with that, and then just push it across. And that will put a mark in there. That moved a little bit. And then I'll do the same. Well, I'm going to have to do it this way so that you can see it. I'll line that up with that inside of that groove. Just a little bit farther in. There. And then we'll run that across. And that'll break the grain and go down into that end grain. So now if you can see this, I'll put my pencil lines on here. You can see that these lines here are lining up with the inside of that groove on the left and right. So I've marked these on the side. Now I'll just cut this out, this piece and this piece, and we'll be left with our tenon. Once we've made our marks here, and we're ready to make these cuts. So I'm going to cut down through here first on the face, just down to where the groove starts. I'm going to use my pull saw for that. This one is nice because it has a spine on the back which keeps it straight. One thing I will point out is when I cut this, I do angle my saw just a couple of degrees toward the end. And what that allows me to do is it will cut down at just a slight angle so that when I put this together with the stile, this edge touches the stile first, just a little bit, and then it gives a really, really nice tight fit. So we're just going to follow that knife mark that we made through here and angle back just a little bit. And be careful not to cut too far. So we don't cut into our tenon. Alright, now we'll flip this up and cut the top part. Alright, so we made this cut through here, in the face here. Now we're going to use this same groove here that we made with our marking gauge, and we're going to cut straight down. Now this is ripping the wood, cutting down into the end grain, ripping it, but this saw is really a nice combination saw where it isn't a perfect rip saw, but it does a really nice job. So I'm going to cut down through here, following that mark that I made, cutting nice and straight, and checking it to make sure I don't go lower. There, it just popped right out. So that's the first cut, and see how that's really nice and clean along here and clean along here. So now I'll make this other cut, and then you'll see the final tenon here with a groove in here. Alright, so both of these pieces are cut, and they should fit together nicely, just like this. And the reason that I cut these, remember I needed a quarter of an inch, or I'm sorry, I only needed a quarter of an inch for the tenon, but I left them at 3/8. And I did that because you always have to fine-tune them a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, you fit it in here and you see how that fits pretty well. I'm just going to put it up here, and I'm going to eyeball kind of where this is here. And then, once I know where that position is, I'm going to draw that right on here, and then I will cut that off with the saw. And then we'll try to put these back together again. And you can see, lo and behold, we have a really nice tight fit there. Flip this over. The other side looks just as good. Excuse me. And the end looks good. There's a tiny little gap I noticed, maybe a 64th or something in there. That's okay. It'll give it a little bit of room to fill it full of glue and make sure we get enough glue in the joint there. But that's the kind of joint that you want. And then here, if I spin this around, then this is where plywood will go right into that groove like that. So this is also the reason this fits so nicely and it's so tight, because we did cut it at a little bit of an angle going back this way, just a tiny little bit, so that it hits here first. And if there's any obstruction in there or a miscut or something, you still have a really nice joint right here. I have, with some of these, I have had the, let me pull this around this way. I have had this still need to be trimmed a little bit more. So I'll just take the rasp side of a file and take some off of that and fine tune each of these joints just a little bit if you need to. But otherwise, that's the kind of joint you're looking for right there.